But with that, welcome to today's virtual training. We're live on March 10th, 2022, 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 1:07 more or less. Yeah, thank you all for being here today. Vince, go ahead and go on to the next slide. All right, so for those that are not so familiar with myself, I am Crystal Cedino, the Training and Development Manager for the Native Learning Center. Really honored, thrilled, and excited to have all of you here today. So thank you. I will be doing all of the kind of background and techie items for today's session. So with that, go ahead and go on to the next slide, Vin, please. All right, beautiful. All right, so how to interact during today's presentation. I see that someone's lost the slides. That could be internet issues and whatnot, Michelle, so just hang tight. If you keep experiencing problems, I definitely recommend closing out of the session and then jumping back in. But before we get started, let me help familiarize you with some of the features available and how the environment works. So we are using Microsoft Teams. It allows us to make this a little bit more interactive than our usual Adobe Connect platform. So again, thank you all for joining me here. If you are viewing today's session through the web browser version, all of your features, if you hover your mouse towards the bottom within your browser, so the screen that you're in, you'll see all of your features pop up, appear and disappear towards the bottom. So with that, you have camera access, you have microphone access, and there's a chat function as well. If you're using the actual application, everything's going to be on the top right corner of Microsoft Teams. All right, go ahead, next slide, Vince. All right, so these are basically the functions of the platform. So again, you have camera, you can turn it on and off. You do have access to that. You also have microphone access. We do want our participants to be able to communicate with us. This session is intended to be more interactive than the webinars, where if you are familiar with our webinar platform, you don't have microphone access. Everything is through the chat box. So this is a little bit cooler. You know, we get to actually have a conversation and work through any of the problems that we, experience. Then there's going to be a 3-dot option, which just brings on more options that you can do for your device, such as show meeting notes. You can kind of put on a background for your like kind of what Vince and I have. He has the Native Learning Center logo, so you can go ahead and upload anything that you might have, all that fun stuff. And then to the right of that is going to be the chat box function feature. So in there, you can just type your message and hit enter. That is one of the best ways, I think, to communicate with us if you have any needs, and we are really quick about getting back to you. So just hang tight. And then there's also the participant button, where you can actually see a list of participants that are in the room if you're curious about how many people there are or who's in here and all that jazz. And you should also have a function of reactions, where you can clap, you can do thumbs up, you can do a heart, all that fun stuff. So definitely keep in mind that we might ask you to use the thumbs up, or, I might tell you, put a 1 in the chat for yes, put a 2 in the chat for no, whatever else it may be. So with that, go ahead and go into the next slide, Vince. I'm going to go ahead and introduce our instructor, our wonderful instructor, Vince Franco, who joined the Seminole Tribe of Florida's Native Learning Center in 2011. And before joining the NLC, he was the executive director of the Marine Industry Education Foundation of Palm Beach County, a 501c3 charitable nonprofit organization that supports youth-oriented programs. Prior to working in Florida, he held the position of executive director of the Central Pennsylvania College Foundation and the vice president of education for Associated Builders and Contractors for Keystone Chapter near Hershey, Pennsylvania. You can smell the chocolate, I bet, Vince. And Vince has a degree in economics from Northern Illinois University. Go Huskies. And with that, we're going to do a review, and then we're going to jump into some exercises, some checks for understanding, So Vince, go ahead and take it on over.
Okay, thank you, Crystal. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Those of you that were here with us, with myself, it was Cora that was with us, if you recall, on Tuesday. So those of you that participated in the webinar on Tuesday and you're here today, welcome back. Those of you that did not participate in the, you weren't here on Tuesday for the initial webinar session, the 90-minute webinar session, you're in the right place today. We're going to spend a little bit of time here going through kind of an abridged version, a highlighted version of that presentation on Tuesday. And as Crystal said, once I'm done with the review presentation, then I'm going to turn it back over to her, and she is going to facilitate the activity part of the workshop today, which would be pretty much the bulk of the time. I wanted to share with you, if you don't mind, those of you that were here on Tuesday were kind enough. There were 77 people, by the way, in that webinar on Tuesday, which is really healthy. That's a healthy number of people. Now, of the 77, about 38%, 29 of you completed the survey, and we appreciate that very, very much, because there's a lot of priceless information that you provide in those surveys. This one is no different. There's a lot of really good information, and a couple things jumped out at me. First of all, there were a series of very brief questions. One was, what would you like the most about the training? And what I gathered from the comments that came in, what everyone liked the most was the examples. And we tried to do that. We tried to present as many examples, and we're going to do that today, but we're going to kind of turn the table a little bit after the review and put you in a situation where you are actually, you as an individual or perhaps as a small group, if you got people with you, will actually kind of work on this process that I was talking about, and kind of turn the table. So you're creating the environment, the examples. But that came through loud and clear as one of the best things that you liked about it, along with learning what a SWOT analysis was, what a SMART goal was, what a logic model process was. Everyone seemed to really get something out of that. And then the next question was aspects of the training that could be improved. And there were a lot of really interesting things. And I just want to paraphrase a couple comments that stood out to me, because again, we really do look at these things and we really do appreciate when you provide us your thoughts and your concerns and your observations. One of the participants, and by the way, I don't know if this is anonymous, so I don't know who submitted these. I don't even know if these individuals are with us today, but regardless of that, the comments are significant, they're important, and I just want to share them with you, because from my perspective as the facilitator, and from my perspective as being the subject matter expert, doing this kind of stuff over the years, some of these comments were, kind of out of the box for me. I looked at them and went, God, I never thought of things that way. The first one here was when we were talking about the logic model process, and I'll get to that just in a minute and refresh everyone's collective memory. But one of the things that came up, someone indicated that one of the outcomes could be related towards product. Now, product was not one of the examples I gave, but this individual said, one of the outcomes could be product generated or product centric. And he or she's absolutely right. One of the outcomes of goals could be a product. It all depends on the kind of service that you're providing or the kinds of goods that you're selling or producing. That outcome could be very unique to your particular situation. So the participant is actually right. And he or she was saying, this is something that I need to do on our end, is include an outcome that includes product. So that was a good observation. Another individual said, I would love to do more work groups. Well, here's the good news. If that person is with us today, you're going to do that. That's what this today is about. It said, it goes on to say, perhaps breakouts to discuss ideas of how ideas come to fruition and goals and implementation can come together. That's kind of what we're going to try to do today. Pass it back over to you so you can take either some real examples that you might have, some real initiatives that you're trying to work through, or, you know, a hypothetical situation on your end. And regardless of either one, real or perceived, we're hoping that you picked up on the skill sets, on the logic model process, goal development process, strategic planning process that we talked about Tuesday, so you can do this yourself. Another comment was more interaction. Well, that's what we're going to try to do today. And another one was more time and real-time examples. Again, yep, I'm going to try to do that. That's what the workshops are all about, trying to bring that real-world perspective and enhance the webinars. As Crystal said, the webinars only go so far. They can only provide so much information. Some of it is hypothetical. Some of it is based on real examples, but it tends to lean more on the hypothetical situation and more on the lecture side of a delivery system, where the workshops are just the opposite, hopefully. They tend to be more hands-on driven, that type of thing. So at least that's a goal for today. One other individual said, learning more about grant applications. Well, yeah, what we were doing with the goal development, logic models, strategic plans, you know, just pushing goals and creating them and working with major initiatives, that does fall nicely into the grant scenario, grant writing scenario. But we don't have time here today, nor did we on Tuesday, to talk about a dedicated program on grant writing. That is a full 3.5-day training program. We do that. The Native Learning Center does offer that. It's just not something we can really get into today, but it's everything we're talking about today and going to be doing today falls into grant writing, because it's difficult to do a grant narrative if you don't have goals and outcomes and results to measure your performance, right? So it's part and parcel of good grant writing. And it's very apropos to putting together a successful grant narrative where you're trying to describe in words what your outcomes are going to be. Going through the process that we were talking about on Tuesday falls right into that. But today's session and Tuesdays was not so much grant writing centric. No, that's a whole nother training program, but good stuff. And someone else put a very long comment in here about being on a board of directors for a particular tribe in a particular department of a tribe, and wanted help in reaching out to tribal housing residents, to a tribal housing department within their tribe, how to do that and how to solicit that tribal entities, tribal housing department, I think it's a TDHE, their help in gathering information from the community, soliciting information, and asked for the Native Learning Center's help in doing that specifically for their tribe. That goes a little bit beyond the parameters of what we're doing here. But my comment is, if you are the person that wrote that and you're still in attendance here today, then reach out to me individually and we'll do that outside of the parameters of this training program, this workshop, because it's a unique situation and it would take a little bit more time. And I don't want to waste anyone else's time listening to one particular tribe and its efforts to do something when I can handle that as a sidebar conversation. So if that person is here, or if anyone, by the way, any of you have any concerns or interests and you want to have a deeper dive or ask specific questions and go beyond what we're doing here in the workshop, even though we encourage you to participate in the workshop, if you want to do it privately, that's fine. You can reach out to me. Email is the best way to do it. We're not, with my schedule, I'm kind of in the office. I'm not in the office. I work remotely, back and forth. So email is the best way to get a hold of me, Vincent Franco at semtribe.com. Or you can contact Crystal Cedino, or you can contact Cora Anthony in our training department, and that message will be then relayed. You can contact anyone, quite frankly, at the Native Learning Center and ask, for me, or ask a question that's in my wheelhouse, and that email will get to me. I promise you that. So this individual and any individual that has follow-up questions, please feel free, if you don't do it today, to reach out at any time, and we will do our best. I will do my best. I know Crystal will, to connect with you and to try to help you as best we can. Okay. So I just wanted to share that with you. Let's get into a quick review here before we get into the meat of the workshop here. Review presentation. I talked about, as you see on the screen here, I talked about SMART goals and using the logic model system in creating not only the SMART goals themselves, but a strategic plan. But I also talked about something before getting into the goals, and that is, it was one of the comments too. Someone wrote, I finally got to understand the difference between a SWOT, what SWOT stands for and what SMART stands for. And what we're going to be talking about or I'm going to be talking about for the next few minutes is this SWOT analysis. SWOT, it's an acronym for strength, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And I know some of you are familiar with this, some of you are not. I really, whatever whatever process you use, however you do this, I prefer using the traditional old school SWOT analysis process. We did it with the Native Learning Center 2 or 3 times over the almost 11 years that I've been there. Whatever you call it and whatever modified version of it, I think it's a really good idea to do something like this, either for yourself, analyzing your own strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, also perhaps for your department, for your organization, for your tribe or your tribal entity, for your nonprofit business, whatever it may be, whatever operation we're talking about. A SWOT analysis is a good thing, and I'm going to get into that, refresh everyone's memory, talk about it a little bit, and even see if you have some thoughts, because my analysis of my contribution to the SWOT analysis demonstration coming up is from my brain, and I'd like to see or encourage you to share some of your ideas too, where those strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats lie within yourself, within your organization or department, if you're willing to share. So the SWOT analysis is the first thing I'm going to talk about, refresh our memory on that. Then I'm going to move into the SMART goal development using what's referred to as the logic model system, and then kind of use all of that information that we've gained from doing those 2 major functions to create the framework of a strategic plan. And as I was saying Tuesday, I don't want anyone to freak out or be afraid of the phrase strategic plan. Strategic plan is no more complicated, no more sophisticated than taking the goals that we've established, if they're done correctly, taking the goals that we've attempted to establish and pushing them out into the subsequent years, 1 year, 2 year, 3 years. My rule of thumb is usually not pushing our strategic plan out more than 3 years, because there's too many variables that come into play with trying to be accurate and trying to project our goals. It's hard enough projecting SMART goals for the current year or perhaps the next fiscal year, 2023, let alone 24, 25, and 26. So, the shorter period of time that you can do a strategic plan, the better off I think you're going to be from an accuracy standpoint. So that's important. I think that's a good rule of thumb, a good best practice to go by. When I hear these organizations out there with 10-year, 50-year, 20-year, and even one, it was an institution of higher learning, a college that had a 50-year strategic plan. I'm thinking in my mind, there's really no way that you could have accurate goals, SMART goals associated with, or, that you use to generate that long of a strategic plan. 3 years is difficult enough because of all the variables and changes and adaptions and, just our work environment that we live in. There's just too many changes. So, Dawn says, thank you for all this. I am interested in the template that we can use after we have named all of our yes, absolutely. Yeah. This presentation, Crystal, correct me if I'm wrong, this presentation is being recorded and this will be available for downloading in the same way that our webinars are, correct? Crystal, if you're listening.
I am listening. I'm here.
Okay.
No, it's not in the same way that you would access our webinars. This is going to be available on our YouTube channel. I would say give us about a week in order to get it up because it is a lot of content. It's a whole video. And you'll be able to see and hear us as you are now. So in about a week, it'll be up. We're usually quicker with our webinars just because the system is made for that. But yeah, it will be available for recording. or for viewing after the live session.
And thank you. And of course, the webinar that we did on Tuesday, that's available as well. Not only the PowerPoint presentation, but also the voiceover, you know, the whole presentation is there. All right, let's keep moving on. All right, let's get into that SWOT analysis that I just mentioned. Four major components. Again, I'm calling it a SWOT analysis, that it's an acronym for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. You can, you know, there's other names for it, there's other processes, but it basically measures the same thing within our organization. These four things. We want to look internally for the first two things. The strengths and weaknesses are internal qualities, either of ourselves, of our colleagues, of our department and its processes, of the tribe and its processes. We're not looking at names here, Johnny or Jane. We're looking at processes. The strengths and weaknesses of the processes that we have in place within our department, within our program, etc. The bottom two, opportunities and threats, are external, outside influences that have some effect, either positive or negative, on our operation or on ourselves or on our department. First of all, opportunities that come our way, we have no control over them, but they're kind of windfalls. They're things that we can take advantage of, but have absolutely no control over. Perhaps like an increase in federal funding that just kind of trickles down to us. On the other side of the coin are those threats out there. You know, right now, you know, the first thing I'm sure that at least pops in my mind, and it's maybe with you folks too, is the cost of transportation, the cost, specifically the cost of fuel, the cost of gas. And you know that's going to have some kind of effect on the trucking industry, on the cost of airfare, and just on our cost as individual consumers trying to go from point A to home to work, for example. You know, I filled up the car yesterday when it was just a tad, and we're in Southeast Florida. Crystal's up in Fort Lauderdale, that's Broward County. I'm up just a little bit in Palm Beach County. I filled up the car yesterday and it was $4.20 a gallon. You know, I don't drive the biggest car in the world, but that was pretty expensive to do that. And then I heard this morning it jumped up another 18 cents, at least in our area. So, you know, and this is going to get worse before it gets better. We have absolutely no control over that. And a lot of other things are going to be affected. And that trickle down effect is going to hit us probably in $5. Where, Don? Are you in the West Coast? Just curious. I know California. Okay, South Dakota. I imagine, you know, California always seems to lead the way of these kind of things as far as cost factors. I'm afraid to even ask what it is out in the West Coast. Probably $80 a gallon or something crazy. But it's gonna get worse before it gets better. It's gonna have a trickle down, if not even trickle down, that's a wrong word because that sounds dainty and, you know, soft. It's gonna have a major impact on what we do and what we function. And you know what? That's something probably, and I was talking about this with our staff at the Native Learning Center that, thank you, Erica. Yeah, 429, yeah, 459. I was talking about this yesterday when we had our staff meeting at the Native Learning Center. We don't even know some of the ways that these things, that these threats are going to happen to us with the war between Russia and, you know, what's happening in the Far East there. We really don't know all the repercussions yet, but you can pretty much guarantee that we're going to see the first wave of those things coming through. And that's considered a threat, I think. I'd love to see some of the opportunities, but the threats are more significant right now. We're seeing that, as I mentioned, in gas prices, but I think we're also going to see some other things that are in development that we're not even aware of. I can tell you that from, you know, looking at federal regulations, again, something we can't control, specifically the Uniform Guidance 2 CFR Part 200, which control all of us that receive federal funding, have to abide by the regulations of what's called the Super Circular Uniform Guidance 2 CFR Part 200. There were some new regulations put in there by the Trump administration about some limitations on purchases from foreign entities, even if they're friendly, like Canada and Mexico, let alone the enemies that are out there. But there were some purchase limitations put in place that we had no control over, and a lot of it pertained to housing. There was limitations put on lumber, on PVC pipe, On concrete aggregate, concrete is made up of several different components, and a lot of those components were restricted. And you've probably heard, of other restrictions. The automotive industry is having a lot of restrictions because they're having difficulties with the shipping, and so on. I don't think that's going to get any better in the short term. I think it's going to get worse, and I think we need to prepare ourselves for a steady stream of increased prices that are going to affect us directly and indirectly. And not only prices, but I think there's going to be some other threats that we're going to have to deal with as administrators in our respective programs, whether you're tribal or whether you're not tribal, whether you're in a nonprofit or a for-profit or an LLC. I think we're going to have to prepare for worse before better. Gas prices just leading the way, other limitations to follow. So heads up, be prepared with your internal controls, your policies and procedures, that your processes might be subject to subtle and maybe even radical changes as some of this stuff is brought our way and makes its way to the Dakotas and California and Florida, like we're at, Wisconsin, everywhere. We're going to be hit by this in the short term. Stocks, bonds, everything. I'm watching that closely too, and I have absolutely no control, and I'm gnashing my teeth and wringing my hands because I know there's no control over that. The stock market, people are running around like chickens with their heads cut off. They don't know what to do, and they have no control over things. So it is a hot mess right now, and it's going to be that way. The threats are going to be substantial. I don't mean to be negative, but we need to prepare for that. And I'm hoping the opportunities, although they'll be less than the threats, we need to prepare for hopefully a few opportunities that come our way, but be prepared for basically the worst of it. Now, here's my view, and I'm sure I'd love to hear, the next slide, of course, is a blank version of this. This is my interpretation. If you look at the columns from left to right, my interpretation of some internal strengths, and then second from the left, that column, internal weaknesses. Those are the internals, green for the positive, red for challenges or negative. And then on the right side of the screen, external opportunities and external threats. Some of these things I've already talked about, and these come from Vince, they come from my brain. So just to point them out real quick, over on the left side, top down, that column, staff expertise is always a good internal strength. Morale, leadership, mission, a clear mission, strong policies and procedures are not necessarily strong, but clear policies and procedures that are up to date. A good reputation, a good working reputation among your colleagues, among your department, board of directors to each other, from board to staff, et cetera, et cetera. Good working relationships and a good corporate style. Internal weaknesses, turnover, poor morale, lack of professional development. That if you receive federal funding, folks, if you receive federal funding, you have to have a written policy that states that everyone that is affected by that federal funding is participating, and you're documenting the fact that they are participating in professional development sessions like we're doing today. You've got to have that as one of your policies and procedures. So surprised if you're not aware of that. If you receive federal funding, if you're a housing entity and you receive the Indian Housing Block Grant, you've got to have a written policy as part of your internal controls. You've got to have that too, internal controls, but a specific written policy that addresses professional development of everyone. And you're probably going to have to report on that in one way, shape, or form to your funder. I know we have to do it to HUD to tell them every year that we are doing professional development, and we've documented that amongst all of our staff. Another one, fear of change, that affects everybody. We've always done it this way for years and years and years. And then you come in, or they come in, or that organization comes in and they want to change our processes, and we don't know how to deal with it. As my example just a moment ago with stock, with Wall Street. Fear of change, don't know how to deal with it, running around. What do we do? What are you doing? I don't know. We don't know how to deal with this situation. Fear of change. Location, penalty, and restrictions that are out of your control, maybe from an audit or a program review. internal politics, and lack of efficiency. Hopefully you're doing self-monitoring that'll help mitigate lack of efficiency. But that could be part of your SWOT analysis. Where are you deficient in processes? All right, on the other side of the coin here, the external influences, rapid growth potential, new products or services that are above and beyond what you do that you could take advantage of. Again, training and development, professional development that may be offered or mandated on some kind of state or federal level that you have to take advantage of. Facility location, potential partners that haven't been discovered yet. A strong economy. We just hope that our respective states and of course our federal government moves from a weak economy with inflation out of control to something that's more stabilized. By the way, I was an econ major in college, so if you hear me referring to a lot of economical terms, like economies of scale and everything being equal and blah, 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 gross national product, blah, blah, blah. That's me just, muscle memory falling back into my economic days as a student, as a co-ed back in, but that was a long time ago, and a whole nother story. Strong economy, good relationships, increased funding. Hopefully we all see that coming our way one shape or another. And then the real one that scares us, the weak economy and its trickle-down effect, political structure that doesn't work to our advantage for whatever reason. And this could be at a local level or at a national or international level. Right now, all we see is international politics, right? And some national politics coming out of DC, but we have to keep in mind the states that we live in, and even the region and the municipalities that we have to do work in. If those political structures are broken, then we might have a real problem in seeking funding and just doing general, operational things. Perception versus reality, I put that right up there with fear of change. The perception of reality, the perception that every tribal entity has a casino or two or three, and that they're rolling in money because the casino's making money hand over fist, and every member of that tribe is getting some kind of six-figure stipend. That's not true. That is, I don't know what that's based on. You hear those that's an extreme, but you hear those kind of talk out there in the bigger community, and it's not true. It's a perception maybe. So that's it. Oh, and the other perception, at least the one I deal with every day, is that the only nonprofit way to go is to be a 501c3 charitable nonprofit. That is I want to say the traditional route, the more acceptable route for nonprofits or organizations that want to be nonprofits, but there are others. There is a tribal nonprofit called the 7871 that is also an IRS classification. The problem is that the philanthropic community doesn't recognize tribal nonprofit status. They recognize, because of their exposure to the more traditional 501c3, and that is ingrained in the philanthropic community. So if you want to learn more about that, sit with me, sit through the grant writing and grant management training programs that the Native Learning Center offers from time to time. And I really get into that, more in the grant writing, because I talk about the difference between the two. Anyway, perception versus reality, competition, uncertainty, that's right up there with fear of change. Who knows what's going to happen? Consumer apathy. Right now, I know a lot of people are getting turned off. We've got the cancer culture issue. We've got the not return to work issue. We've got other apathy issues to deal with, and so on. Decreased funding, that's what's referred to as sequestration, and just the simple cost of operation getting more and more expensive. All right. If we were together as a group, I would ask you, all of you, to sit down either individually or work in small groups to come up with your own. No, we're not face-to-face, well, we are kind of face-to-face, using this platform where we can be. But I'm not breaking us up, or Crystal and I are not breaking you up yet, but I'd love to see what you might think. And I'm encouraging you to use the chat box here for a minute. Let's just pause here for a minute, because I would like to get your take in the chat box. I'm going to go back up so you can see my input on those 4 areas of the SWOT analysis. And if you don't mind sharing, I'd like to see some of your thoughts on any of these areas that you have, because I'm sure you can think of some areas in addition to what I have that are unique to your situation. So please, let's take 5 minutes, put some thoughts down. I love it. If you don't mind sharing, I love to see where you're coming from with your organization, department, tribe. You don't need to name names. I'm just looking for areas of strength, areas of weakness internally, or those outside influences, opportunities or threats, if you don't mind sharing. So I'm going to mute my microphone for a minute and just give you a few minutes to work on that.
So go ahead and throw in the chat box some internal strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Michelle,
Ageism.
Yep, just put ageism.
Yes.
I've got about 32 of you in the room, so I should see some major action happening in that chat box. Please and thank you.
Ageism is good. I like that one. That could be an internal weakness. I'm just curious, Michelle, are you looking at that as a weakness? Are you looking at it internally as a weakness? Are you also looking at it as an external threat? Too many lists. Yeah, too many to list. I hear you.
Why don't we narrow it down just a little bit? Let's think of some internal strengths.
Okay, good idea.
Partnerships are a great strength of ours. Weaknesses, lack of plan for training and education. Yeah, okay. Perfect, Miguel. I will. Thank you. Ooh, awesome. I might use that then. So thank you, thank you. Rosemary said strength, cultural knowledge.
Yes.
Annie stated lack of knowledge and therefore buy-in about planning.
Mm-hmm.
And Jamie says, agree, Annie.
Mm-hmm. Me too.
Come on, folks.
Lack of knowledge. So cultural knowledge on one side of the equation and lack of knowledge on the other side of the equation. Like that.
Yes. Stage mentioned staff knowledge and experts in the field. Yep. Oh, and he says, I'll just say it, tribal politics. Yep. Yes, we all know that can potentially be a thing. Tina mentions strength, mission, and relationships, external threats, competition.
Some of the competition you're not even aware of. Yep.
Right. Michelle stated native preference if applied correctly.
Agreed. In hiring, in vendors, in construction, I agree with you, Michelle.
Weakness. Not Erica mentions weakness, not learning centric, lack of buy-in from higher ups. That is true.
Mm-hmm. Lack of collaboration.
Right. Carl states strengths, community commitment, employee skill sets, historical documentation, cultural knowledge. Weakness, time. Government programs to destroy native languages, COVID threatening elder speakers. Very true.
Yeah.
Sage also mentions weakness, lack of time.
Mm-hmm.
Rosemary, programs / departments working in silos. Oh, we've seen that all too often. It happens. Jamie, weakness, overextended, lack of skilled human capital. Sage, threats, COVID issues. I think these are great. What do you think, Vince?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. These are great.
Dawn, staff expertise, lack of employees, training and development, climate change.
Oh, climate change.
Miguel, on the line of previous and future workshop, the knowledge or lack of board of director responsibilities, knowledge of Robert's rules, grant management, and other applicable regulations.
Yeah.
Annie.
Tuesday, we talked about parliamentary procedure, aka Robert's Rules of Order, and having a strong foundation in that, or some kind of modified version of it, Miguel. You're spot on with that. That's a problem. Could be a problem.
Definitely.
Time.
Annie, time and commitment to each of these challenges. Michelle, tribe knowing to advise outside vendors that the tribe owns data gathered.
Mm.
Elena, external threat, damaged relationships with the local utility company. And Cold Springs Rancheria, which, by the way, if you can put your name in the chat box, I'd greatly appreciate it. But stated weakness, fear of change, tribal politics.
You know, Michelle brings up a good point that we haven't really touched on, and that is intellectual property. She's talking about the tribe knowing to advise outside vendors that the tribe owns the data collected. That's intellectual property that is owned by the tribe. We see that within our own tribe, and they make it perfectly clear that everything we do, every vendor we interact with, every thing that we create, like this training program right here in this PowerPoint, belongs, it's intellectual property that and the data that comes with it belongs to the Seminole Tribe of Florida in our respect. So we need to keep that in mind, and that needs to be integrated and incorporated into our, not only our internal controls, but in our dialogue that we have, as Michelle's pointing out, with vendors and others, not just vendors, but you know, everybody, that this information we are employees of a particular tribe or particular nonprofit or other entity. So everything that we do and develop is owned by them. Simple as that.
Miguel, experience of board of advisors and consultant.
Yeah.
Annie, communication issues, so many virtual personal issues, generational trauma, etc., etc. And Corinne states, strengths for my tribe is that we come up with great ideas for the company and community itself. However, we struggle with implementing the ideas. Yep, that reminds me of like creating internal controls and then just leaving them on the shelf. Or a strategic plan and just leaving it on the shelf and it collects dust. Yep.
Okay, good. That's good. That's good.
All right. Thank you.
How about some outside
Yeah.
influences, whether positive or negative, whether there are opportunities or threats?
Opportunity, acquired knowledge of utilizing technology. Sage mentions good collaborations. Any regulation changes that don't make sense.
Yeah, well,
all too well.
Or you need to, or they're vague. You know, I do this a lot in our presentation of grants management. The federal regulations are not clear all the time, and there's a lot of room for interpretation. And how do you deal with that? As she's pointing out, you know, how do you deal with poorly written regulations or vague regulations? How do you deal with that with your own internal controls and your policies and procedures? We're going to have to join me on the grants management program to get some tips and some best practices on how to deal with that. How to design your internal controls. Natural resources. Okay. Yeah, inconsistent funding from the feds. Heavier and heavier competition, unlimited funding. Yep.
Lou, if you could put your first name and last name into the chat, I would greatly appreciate it. It's for our registration. And I went ahead and muted you just to avoid
just changing administrations. And I suppose that could be on any level. That could be on a tribal level. That could be on, a municipality or even at a state level, the changeover. And then every time, invariably, there are people that come on as replacements that don't know what they should know.
Yeah.
Oh God, we even see that when you say a little more on that. We've even seen that when it comes to audit time, and this is something you got to be careful with. We've got auditors coming in or program reviewers that don't know how we operate. And you just can't leave it in their hands, to take over and do your audit or program review without some coaching on our part to educate the auditors or program reviewers, whether they're from HUD or whatever, on how our particular program works and our operational standards. So, yep, Micromanagement too, I see that. A lot of boards deal with this, nonprofits that have boards of directors, which is all of it. Have to deal with this issue of micromanagement. I talked about that last week when I did the presentation on board of director training. How tribal politics kills good ideas.
All right, Vince, we have a few checks for understandings before, and we have until like 2:15. So I think we should wrap this up and kind of move forward.
All right, sounds like a plan. Let's keep
All right,
on
thank
going.
you everyone for participating. I'm gonna go ahead and turn my camera off again because I'm freezing up a little bit. And we're gonna actually have our first check for understanding in just a second.
Do you see the matrix up on the screen?
Yeah, I think so.
I'm
freezing up. Oh no.
Okay, I'm gonna try to reboot my share. All right. Hopefully you can see that, and hopefully I can move it.
Yes. Is it, you still have it on conducting a SWOT analysis?
Yeah, but I'm trying to progress it to the next slide, and it's either super slow or
13:0:17.
Pardon me?
I think somebody unmuted themselves on accident.
Oh, okay. All right. Presenting.
Try clicking back into the presentation, like just click, Vince, and then see if you can move there.
There we go. Okay.
Yay!
Okay.
First check for understanding. And it's going to be a poll. So I'm going to open it up really quick. Launch. All right, you should have a form pop up on your screen. And the question is, check for understanding 1, what does the acronym SWOT stand for? So you have options A, B, C, or D. Go ahead and let us know. It is anonymous, so fear not. So it seems that 70% of our participants are saying that the answer is strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats.
Absolutely correct.
And we've got 14 responses.
Okay.
Okay, no worries. If it doesn't pop up for you, that's totally fine. You can put the answer in the chat box. This is just a fun way to kind of incorporate some other ideas.
Ready to move on?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's go into part 2 of this presentation. We talked about the SWOT analysis. Now let's make the transition into talking about SMART goals using the logic model system. I'm getting a lot of feedback. Someone's microphone is on. All right. This is the next part. We're going to talk about, as you recall, if you were with me Tuesday, I talked about the logic model systems. We're going to try to create SMART goals using the logic model system. The logic model system was created by the United Way corporate organization about 20 years ago, and it was a way to be able to create a system that leveled the playing field so that they had a good idea whether they were getting a grant application from a small organization or a medium-sized or large, that they were measuring the same results, so that they could come up with some kind of educated decision on the worthiness of a particular grant request. The philanthropic community has adapted this system wholeheartedly. Now, they might call it, different funders might call it something different, but it's basically the same thing. And I'm going to show you, like I did on Tuesday, or refresh your memory, of a simple version of the logic model. Keep in mind that what I show you can always be expanded upon. But there are 4 major groups, I'll tell you verbally and in a narrative form, as you can see on the screen, 4 major measuring mechanisms of the logic model system. The first one is we always need to work with some kind of a major initiative, which is the big project, the big idea that we want to accomplish. And from that idea or from that major initiative, we need to be able to create SMART goals. And SMART is an acronym, which I'll show you in a minute, but it's basically developing reasonable and realistic goals, and maybe a series of goals that are really just a breakdown of our major initiative into smaller pieces. The real work here is converting each of those goals into something to show how they're measurable by assigning in the short term some kind of an outcome, which is usually reflected numerically, and in the long term, which is usually as a result, which is usually reflected as a percentage. So let's look at this graphically or in a matrix form. The top of the page here that you're looking at, the 4 bullets at the top, that say just what I told you and just what was on the prior screen. The top bullet, we all need to have at least one major initiative to work with, whether it's education for youth or whether it's an immunization vaccine program from our health people, or whether it's a job workshop for creating jobs for our adults, or even a bricks and mortar, like a building of housing or the building of a multi-use facility. Different products, right? Those are all different products, but they're all going to follow the same process. And that is the logic model process to develop goals, outcomes, and results. So the second bullet talks about creating the goal. The bullet underneath that, calculate short-term outcomes, and then the bottom bullet, results. Look at the matrix at the bottom, moving from the column from the left to the right, and you'll see my representation of variables that can fit into each one of those 4 bullet areas. From the far left, that column, the major initiative, different term for that would be a major focus area or a major project or a program or an idea. Anything that is of significance and importance to the community, to your leadership, to whomever your constituents are. There's always going to be a slew of those big ideas. But if you can't take it to the next step, goals, outcomes, and results, your initiative is nothing more than a dream. It's nothing more than a pipe dream. You've got to be able to take initiatives and break them down. If you can't break them down into smaller steps, which I'm calling goals, then it's not really something that you can do. And I think you'll see the significance of that. Look at the goal column. Underneath that, it says some kind of a quantifiable fact-based step or an intent. That's what a goal is. It's breaking down that huge major initiative into smaller fact-based processes. That's what a goal is. And they need to be each goal, and I'm sure there's going to be more than one for every major initiative, maybe 10, maybe 100, maybe 1,000 smaller goals associated with that big, huge project. But each goal needs to be specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. So it behooves us, if we're going to try to create goals for a major initiative or solicit input from others or the community itself to help create smaller goals to help us accomplish the major initiative, it behooves us to break it down into the most common denominator, right? The smaller we can break the goals down, the more achievable they come theoretically. So because you want to be able to have goals that are measurable and attainable and realistic. So taking a major initiative and then assigning a goal to it that is just as obscure and nebulous as the initiative itself doesn't do you any good. Or taking a major initiative and creating a goal that says we need to get grant funding for this. Well, yes, grant seeking funding in general is a given. What we're looking for here in the goal is something quantifiable related to the program itself or to the project itself in its most common denominator, broken down. So we've got to be able to do that or convince our community members or convince our leadership that just throwing out a big goal, like we should create a multifaceted facility, a bricks and mortar facility should be 3 stories tall and be 17,000 square feet. And it should cater to the services of elders and youth and veterans and pregnant women and everyone under the sun. Well, that's a wonderful idea. It's a grandiose idea. How are we going to get there? we've got to be able to break that concept down right off the top of my head. I'm thinking 4 good sized goals right after that, right? Just from what I said a moment ago, you've got elders, you've got youth, you've got veterans, and you've got women and minorities. You've got all kinds of different, there's 4 or 5 right there. And you've also got, depending upon how, this comes across, building that kind of a bricks and mortar facility, you've got the whole planning and construction and utilization phases. There's 3 of them right there. So there's 7 little sub goals already just off the top of my head. You have to break it down. But I think you see my point. You've got to have goals that are so associated directly with the major initiative. Now, each one of those goals, hopefully is broken down, the common denominator broken down small enough that you can measure some productivity. In the short term, this is the 3rd column from the left, you should be able to measure some kind of progress or non-progress, an increase or a decrease of some kind. I give 3 examples there. How many people would be reached? That might be one example. Another one is how many will participate. That's another example of trying to measure outcome. The 3rd one would be how many events would be held. That might be somewhere of an outcome. And I'm also going to quote another one that was provided to me, product outcome. What the participants will do as a result of participating. Will they somehow increase their health status? For example, lower their BMI index or something like that that can be measured? Perhaps, especially if your major focus is in the health area. All right, so outcomes usually matter some, they're of course based on the goal, they're going to be fact driven, they're going to be some kind of numerical measure in the short term. And you define what the short term is, whether it's 6 months, a year, or 2 years, or a day, or a week. Whatever that short term is, you've got to measure some kind of productivity that comes out of the goal that you're trying to accomplish. And in the long term, looking down a little bit, whether it's a year or 2 years or 15 months, what are the results that are going to generate from that goal? If you can generate an outcome, you should be able to generate a result. So let me see if I have an example here. I do. Let me show you this example, which is just out of my brain. I'm sure you have others that you could think of that are more appropriate to your organization, but here's mine for sake of discussion. Same concept, different product. My major initiative for this example is enhancing academic proficiencies, which is a very broad topic. What do you mean by that? One goal could be increase academic performance levels for grades 3 through 5 for the current school year. Okay, that sounds like something that could be measurable, right? Increase academic performance. What would we use for that? Well, you could probably think of some things, but from that, I'm hoping to generate, at least in my hypothetical example here, that 30 students would be exposed to enhanced opportunities in reading, math, and integrated math. And if that's the case, within my goal parameters, grades 3 through 5 within the school year, if 30 students are exposed, then theoretically, I should be able to generate some kind of a result within the academic year, or within, maybe a 2-year period or 3-year period in this case, perhaps, where proficiencies do increase. We were able to measure their proficiencies, and there's an increase that's reflected as a percentage, a long-term percentage. In this case, increase of academic performance rates to 60% of expected proficiencies. So if everything remains the same, if everything stays equal, that's my economics term from back in the day. If everything stays equal, nothing changes, then my projection of the current school year would have a specific outcome and a specific result. Both are measurable. That is the concept we want to inject into every major initiative we have coming our way. And this process, using this logic model process, is something that everyone can use. Grant writers can use it. Strategic planners can use it. Anyone that's responsible for productivity or programs can use this. This is something we should be teaching our leadership and our colleagues that this is the process. Otherwise, we don't have a mechanism in place to measure our productivity. And a lot of funders, as I mentioned before, in the philanthropic community, whether they're federal agencies or private individuals or corporate entities, they want to know when they make a donation, whether it's a grant or some other investment within your nonprofit, within your organization, that is an investment, and they're gonna be tied to that investment, and they're gonna be looking for a return on investment, right? One of the questions they may have for you today, next week, next month, next year is how are you measuring your success? How are you measuring your productivity? Your program sounds good, but how are you, tell me in writing, or verbally at least, tell me how you're going to measure your success. If you can't fall back on this type of process, then you can't describe in any specific terms with any real satisfaction how your program is going to progress. Whether you're trying to speculate on where it'll be 6 months from now or a year from now, or whether we are a year from now, and this is March of 2023, and we're looking back at the completed year, if we don't have these benchmarks in place with real numbers as an outcome and real projected results, then we have no way of measuring increases or decreases. We have no way of measuring success or failure or challenges. We have no way of predicting where we're going to go. I hope that makes sense. This is something that the grant funders across the board are looking for. They may call it something different, and that's what you need to be aware of, but that's what they're referring to, the logic model. Now, what you're seeing, a simplified version of it on the screen. This has just got 4 components to it. You might have a slew of goals. You might also have additional columns in here because I kind of simplified it, but you might have staged or staggered outcomes, for example. So you might have outcomes that come in waves, so to speak. There might be 2 or 3 outcomes. Maybe there's an outcome for the first 6 months, and then there's an outcome for the second 6-month period. So that would change your results as well. So what you're seeing is a simplified version of it, so that you can at least get the skill set of doing that. So that was the purpose of it. So Crystal, I think we're ready for understanding number 2.
Awesome. Okay, I'm going to launch it in just 1 second. Check and launch. And if you can't answer this within the form, just go ahead and put the answer in the chat box. That's totally okay. So the question is, check for understanding 2. What are the 4 main components of the logic model system? You have A, initiatives, goals, outcomes, results. B, initial idea, goals, outcomes, results. C, initiatives, games, outcomes, results. And D, initiatives, goals, other ideas, and results. We'll give y'all a moment to answer that. I see 14 responses, 15, 16 in the chat. Thank you, thank you. 17 responses. Again, this is totally anonymous. I have no idea who responds. So, and don't feel, weird or anything if you don't get the answer correct. We're all here to learn. All right, so it seems that 63% of you are selecting A. What are the 4 main components of the logic model? Initiatives, goals, outcomes, and results. And what is the answer, Vince?
A, it is A. At least for the presentation that we're doing here today, that is the representation that we have. Major initiatives, goals, outcomes, and results. And for sake of argument, it might be called, you might call it something different. I had an attendee a couple months ago when we did this program say that in our establishment, we use major goals as the phrase for the big project. And then underneath goals, we have initiatives, and that's fine. We're talking semantics. But, the point that I'm making here is that, a logic model has 4 components regardless of the titles. And hopefully you understand the process here that what we're trying to do is break down these major initiatives into bite-sized pieces or baby steps. Now there might, like any typical baby, there might be 1,000 little steps, 1,000 little goals that are associated with a major initiative. But the important thing and where the difficulty comes in, or the challenge, where the rubber meets the road, so to speak, is not only identifying those goals, but being able to convert them numerically and from a percentage standpoint into short-term numbers, long-term percentages. So enough of that. Take it to the last. This should be, go back over here. Oh. Okay. All right, the last thing, and I'm going to close out with this, is the strategic plan portion of it. As you can see here on the screen, the strategic plan process is really not that complicated. If you've done your SMART goals and using the logic model properly or effectively, then you've really got the foundations of a strategic plan, right? If you've gone through that process, first you've gone through the SWOT analysis or something like it to try to help you identify where your strengths and weaknesses are, okay? So you know where your assets are. Then you bring it to the next level, and that is the solicitation or attainment of some of the major initiative or several major initiatives. And then either by yourself or with a team, go through and create the goals that are assigned, as we talked about just moments ago. And from each one of those goals, whether it's 1 or 100 or 1,000, you need to be able to calculate a short-term outcome and a long-term result. All right, and let's just assume, as we showed in 2 slides ago with that schematic there, that we're just looking for the current fiscal year or the next fiscal year, 2022 or 2023, just for sake of, for sake of argument. So moving to the strategic plan portion of it by using what we've already learned should not be a difficult process. Look at the screen in front of you, and what you see at the top, it's the strategic plan, and you see enhance academic proficiencies. That's the one I talked about. Goal number 1, increase academic proficiencies. Goal number 1, and you'll see the matrix underneath that, the column from the left. Let's start there. That is not all that is a vertical representation of the horizontal screen I showed you 2 slides ago. All I did was take everything for this, in this case, school year 2022, and I listed it vertically for ease of demonstration. So as you look at the column, increased levels for grades 3 through 5, just like I said, for the current school year. 30 students will be exposed to reading and math as an outcome within that measurable time period, school year 22. And as a result, 60% of the students, 60% increase in performance rates of expected proficiencies. Okay, that was our projection 2 slides ago for the current year. Now, creating a strategic plan is no more complicated than taking our logic model process here and pushing it out to the next year, then the next subsequent year, and even perhaps the year after that, and so forth. So what you see here on the screen is school year 23, 24, and 25. And all I did was take our projections from the current school year and push them out using, as I refer to in my economics language, using economies of scale. What do I mean by that? Look at school year 23 at the top of that column, and the top of school year 24, and at the top of school year 25. You'll see that we've increased levels in the grades, and now not just from 3 to 5, but from 3 to 7. We've added 2 more academic levels, and then the next school year we've added 2 more up to grade 9, and then by the 4th, I guess that would be the 4th year of operation, we've got at least in this example 9 academic levels from grades 3 through 12. I don't know why I didn't go to grade 1. Don't ask me, but you see my point here. We're getting better. Basically, we're getting better at what we do. That's what economies of scale means. We're getting more efficient as we move, at least theoretically, as we move from year to year.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
What's that? Someone ask a question? I'm sorry.
No, a participant entered the room and I needed to mute them. You're good.
Okay. What I'm showing here in the example is economies of scale. We're getting better at what we do. Everything being equal, we're getting better, which means we're getting more proficient, more efficient at what we do. And you can see it in the middle section there. The current school year, 30 students, and that progresses to 60 students, and then 90, and then 120. We're getting better at what we do. And then the bottom reflection of our results, theoretically here for demonstration purposes, again, we're getting better, 60% to 65 to 70 to 75. So everything being equal, no interruptions in our plan, at least as we sit here on March 10th, 2022, and we're projecting not only the current year, but 3 years after that. If there are no changes to the program, then everything looks beautiful. But as Crystal alluded to a while ago in the intro, it doesn't work that way. Creating a strategic plan that looks beautiful. I mean, here's a little snapshot. That looks beautiful. Great projections, Vance. It looks nice. Great. Boom. Wrap it up, print it out, put it in a binder, and put it on the shelf. Doesn't work that way, because what's happening in our real world these days? Things are changing, right? Things are changing all the time, if not daily, if not hourly. Things are changing. So it's almost like you do this, you go through this trouble and calculate this and go through the motions of crunching all these numbers, and then it becomes obsolete the minute you're done with it and projected it. This projection right here you see is obsolete because, you know, I did this a couple months ago in putting this program together. Things have changed since then. You know, theoretically, what could happen is here we are in the current school year, fiscal year 2022, and we're more than halfway through it, right? We're in March, we're more than halfway through it, or about a little more than halfway. What if we weren't successful in integrating grades 3 through 5? Maybe we were only successful in integrating so far grades 3 through 4. Or we were uber successful and we were able to, you know, do more. We were able to integrate grades 3 through 6 or grades 3 through 7 in the current school year. What does that do to our projections in our strategic plan for 23, 24, and 25? It changes everything, right? You would be recalculating all of your numbers. That's why I kind of preach this fact that the logic model process is the mechanism we use, but the strategic plan is really a living document. It's changeable. It has to be. It has to work with us. That's why perhaps you can see that pushing it out into any more years, 26, 27, 28, would not make any sense, because the farther out you push that strategic plan, the more you subject yourself to changes, perhaps even radical changes as you're looking at those years the furthest out. You want to keep your strategic plan nice and tight. You want to keep it perhaps no more than a 3-year projection, current year plus 3 additional, or current year plus 2 additional, not too far out, because you know I'm going to have to make changes to this speculation. Because it was done in fiscal year, at the beginning of fiscal or school year 22. And we're halfway through, things are changing. Because of that, the middle column there, I know I'm not going to get 30 students to be exposed. It's going to be more like 25 or 20 or 19. Okay, we can make that change. It also changes every projection in every subsequent year, right? So our outcomes are going to change, and then also our results are going to change because of that. So what does that mean? It means that your strategic plan is still a worthy thing to pursue. You need to use some kind of process to help you create goals that are achievable and measurable. And that's what the logic middle process allows us to do. From that, we are able to take those measurable goals, those outcomes and results, and then segue or use them as a jump off or as a leap forward to help us calculate our strategic plan in any topic. You know, like I said, process remains the same, product changes. You can do a logic model process for any product, and then you can segue that into a strategic plan for that product, any product, using this kind of a formula, using this process. But be prepared for change. So as Crystal said, we don't do a logic model process goals for the current year, for even the current year, let alone a strategic plan. Print it out, put it in a binder, and put it on a shelf and forget about it. It's not that way. It's a living document. It's something we have to look at, what I refer to as top of mind, always in our discussion. How is something, how is the pandemic, for example, or the war that's happening with Russia, how is that going to change things for us? It's going to. The pandemic surely did. That 2-year deal, what's not even over yet, put major changes into every strategic plan. And if those strategic plans didn't change back in 2020, then their 2022 is going to be way off. So my point is, it's a living document, whether you're a board of directors for a nonprofit or a housing authority or just any type of organization that needs goals to project where they're going to go. Keep in mind that not only your goals need to be adaptable, changeable, flexible, but so does your strategic plan is going to spin off of that. And if you don't adopt that kind of mindset or kind of philosophy, then your strategic plan will be, quite frankly, will be useless to you. So just words of warning, words of caution, hopefully the skill set that comes with using the logic model, developing SMART goals using the logic model process to create achievable goals with measurable outcomes and measurable results will allow you not only to create realistic projections for yourself, for your organization, your department, your tribe, your nonprofit, but also a nice, healthy strategic plan that is flexible and changeable. So that's it. Now, that was my presentation, a review, and more than a review, kind of beefy. But now I'm going to turn kind of things over to you, and with Crystal's help, hopefully you'll be able to do something like this, where this is just exactly what I was talking about. I'm using a vocational training facility as the major objective. I'm only listing one goal here. In this case, it's planning sessions, 6 planning sessions, because you got to start somewhere. You got to have some kind of a plan, I think, to go along with that huge ask, that huge initiative. And there's an outcome. Might be unrealistic, but it's a number for demonstration purposes, and there's a result that I projected. And here's an example of goal number 2, going beyond the planning stage and actually get into the construction phase, because if you have a bricks and mortar facility, then you've got to have some kind of planning with architects, engineers, general contractor, and subs. And then you got to move into some kind of construction phase where you're going past environmental issues, you're clearing land perhaps, or assuming another building. And there's going to have to be either some renovation or new construction. So you have a construction phase. So your outcomes could be soliciting an architect, soliciting a GC, soliciting and approving those two, and with 100% participation of both, and then perhaps move into phase 3, which is more on construction. We're getting into, as they say, the roof is on. Phase 2 might be the actual completion of site prep. I talked about that site preparation, part 1 and part 2. Then I go on to goal number 4 in this particular case. Same initiative, just the 4th goal now, and that is the MEP. If you're not familiar with construction jargon, MEP is the mechanical, the electrical, and the plumbing acronym. Phase 3 would be implementing that construction and then closeout. So, and then of course, here's my representation of kind of a mini strategic plan for that process of creating a bricks and mortar training facility. I only have, for demonstration's sake, I'm only providing 4 goals here. It would be much more in depth than that, with probably many more goals and many more steps within the outcome and results category. But for simplicity's sake, here's my little representation of a strategic plan for that one major initiative. Hope that makes sense to you. Then I go on to some other ones. Different product, same process. This is vaccination, same thing, just different product. So, Crystal, back to you for a last understanding check, a temperature check, and then we'll move into the whole second phase of our workshop.
Beautiful. Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and launch the poll. Check for understanding. Number 3, what is the ideal number of years your strategic plan should be developed for? 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, or 5 years? And by all means, if the form is not popping up, go ahead and toss your answer into the chat box. All right, we've got some mixed answers here. We've got some people that are saying 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. Oh, I've got 21 responses. I
Wow.
love when y'all participate.
And you know, there's no right or wrong answer to this. All of those answers might be right depending upon, you know, the environment that you're working in and the organization you represent. It might be 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, even more. If you're comfortable with that, just a word of caution, the farther you push it out, the more difficult it is to be realistic with it, with specifics, with specifics. You know, there's nothing wrong with having a strategic plan that gives major initiatives being pushed out subsequent years, many years. But if you're trying to provide real tangible numbers, it gets more complicated as you're pushing out, you know, more years. So thank you, everyone. That's wonderful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I feel like I need the the Jeopardy music.
So a review of the review. We talked about the SWOT analysis, talked about that Tuesday, talked about it today to refresh our collective memory. I also talked about probably the most important thing here is using a logic model system or something like a logic model system to develop goals that are measurable, attainable, tangible, time specific, you know, SMART goals that help us not only in the current projections that we're trying to work with in the current year, but also help us design longer term projections for what I'm calling a strategic plan or just long-term projections. We know we can use this mechanism to help us to create the skills that we need to be able to do that type of long-term, you know, short-term within the, you know, perhaps within this fiscal year, next fiscal year, and even longer term, long-term projections or strategic plans. So that's a beautiful thing. And before I turn it completely over to Crystal for, you know, the second half here, just want to refresh your memory. This is what we talked about. This is my scenario at a glance of the logic model process. The 4 bullets at the top always have a major initiative. The problem is I know we always have too many major initiatives. But the important thing is taking that major initiative and being able to break it down into the next 3 steps, creating goals that are attainable and measurable. And if they are measurable, attainable, then they should be able to generate an outcome, or you should be able to generate an outcome, and you should be able in the short term, and you should from that be able to calculate some kind of a result, an increase or a decrease as a percentage in something, you know. And below in that matrix, from the columns from left to right, are the same representation. Initiative on the left, that's our major focus area. The next column is the goal, SMART acronym there. The outcome, some kind of measurable performance in the short term. And then the result, some kind of measurable percentage of increase or decrease, a positive or a negative. So when anyone comes to you down the road, 6 months down the road, a year down the road, and said, how are you measuring your success or your challenges or your failures? You have hard numbers that if you've done your math right and you've worked with this system, you should be able to calculate that. And hopefully you'll be the golden girl or the golden boy of the organization because you'll have your projections there, at least something that you can fall back on and give accurate projections with some kind of reasonable assurance of accuracy. So there's the blank version. And I'll just leave that on the screen because I'm going to turn it over to Crystal to take it from here, unless you're going to break or both.
I am muted. I was actually going to get a temperature check and see how we're feeling. Do we want to go on a short 10-minute break? and then we come back and jump into exercises. You just leave everything open. 1 for yes in the chat, 2 for no. Break or no break? We got 1 for yes. Break, break, break. Break. Oh, Vince. He's like, yes, give me a break.
Even I need a break.
Yes. Okay, cool. So what we're going to do then is take a short break. It's just going to be about 10 minutes, and then we're going to come back and we're going to jump into some exercises. So with that, come running back to your computers at 2:42 Eastern Standard Time. Change that per your zone, but we will be back in 10 minutes, okay? Just leave everything open, and we'll see you in 10 minutes.
Crystal, are you going to populate the screen, or do you want me to put it back up?
I'll go ahead and populate it.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Oh, there we go. Okay. All right. So what you should see in front of you, I'm actually going to break all of you up into groups. So I know that in previous trainings, we've gotten feedback where, you know, we've had participants mention, oh, well, this doesn't really apply to me, or I do this work, and that's totally understandable. However, the point of these workshops is to try and think outside of the box and to learn a concept, if you will, and then later apply it to whatever it is that you are working on. You know, we can't, unfortunately, I wish I had all the time in the world to do these workshops, but we can't do every single scenario that's out there. We would drive ourselves crazy and we wouldn't get through anything. So with that, we're going to be working on major initiatives. So earlier this morning, if you were registered, you should have gotten an email from me with 3 attachments. And, you know, a link to join the room and all of that wonderful jazz. So we're working on the first activity, major initiatives. And what we wanted to do, because we kind of did this last week, but what we wanted to do was give you a scenario, have all of you work on one scenario, and all of you come up with major initiatives for that one scenario. You can use the worksheet, you can use a Word document, however it is that you would like to, you know, move forward with that. But the point of the worksheet that we sent you was so you can go ahead and plug those items in there. So I'm going to create, Vince, you think we're good with like 6 or 7 people in a group?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay, cool. So there's gonna be 6 different groups, and I'd like for all of you to pick one person in your group who either has the longest hair. No, I'm gonna go with that. Whoever has the longest hair is going to be the speaker for your group, and you're gonna create one major initiative, one potential major initiative for your organization. You can create a fake name, you can create anything you'd like, use one of the tribes within your group to go ahead and move forward with this. So for example, here we have enhanced academic proficiencies for elementary students. So it's one major initiative within, I believe the scenario would have been for like education. Am I right in saying that, Vin?
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, in education. So your scenario, multi-purpose community center. It is incredibly vague because we need you to create that major initiative. And that's okay. If y'all have to leave, that's totally fine. Do what you gotta do. But I am gonna be breaking all of you up in just a moment. So keep that major initiative in mind. Okay. Very welcome. You're good, Sage. Thank you. All right. So again, your scenario, multi-purpose community center. Your goal is to create at least one major initiative within your group. So I'm going to go ahead and
Get some person.
hi, everyone.
We weren't keeping track of the time, and we were abruptly interrupted. We were on a roll.
So so sorry about that.
No problem. We should have been keeping track of the time.
No worries, no worries. Right.
Time flies when you're having fun.
There you go. Like I have 31 of you back in the room. Close, close, close. Oh, good. I don't even have to reorganize them. Okay, I think everyone's back. Okay. And yes, Jamie, your screen did just stop sharing. I believe I had a timer and it just it totally canceled y'all out. So I was pretty good. I was pretty close with the time that I had said, about 5 minutes left. All right, it's all good. Okay, well, I hope all of you enjoyed that. And now we're going to do, let me see if I can turn on my, there we go. We are going to do the report out for it. So the scenario that was provided was, oh, I'm getting, sorry guys, one second. At all. Okay. The scenario that all of you were provided, and all of you were provided the same exact scenario. So you had freedom of creativity to develop any sort of facility or anything along those lines. Hold on, I'm gonna go ahead and mute you guys. Thank you. Okay. So I gave all of you creative freedom in order to do whatever you would like with the scenario that was provided. So again, the scenario was multi-purpose community center. It was intended to make it as vague as possible so that you can develop some sort of major initiative. So a possible answer that from that scenario is develop a multi-purpose community center for elders and youth. So again, that's just one example. Folks, make sure you mute yourselves. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to start off with group 1, and the person with the longest hair within group 1, go ahead and unmute yourself or throw your major initiative. And if you came up with more than one, that's totally okay. Go ahead and throw them in the chat or unmute yourself and speak. So group 1. Oh, I don't remember what group number I was in. That's important.
I think that's our group, isn't it?
I can check. Hold on one second. Let me.
I didn't even pay attention to what group I was in either.
Guys, let me check. My thing's loading. I'm gonna go ahead and
You have to
turn
name
myself
names.
off. Yeah, I have to name names.
Yeah, I didn't keep track of our number either.
Should have put that in the announcement. Keep track of your group. All right, hold on. I'm jumping the group. Okay. So in group 1, it looks like I had Calvin, Elena, Carol, and so if any of you remember those individuals, that was your group.
Okay, so do you want us to give a update?
Yes, ma'am.
All right.
In fact, Carol, I would even show our little thing.
Yeah, can I share my screen?
Let me go ahead and give you permission.
That's great.
I think you might be able to actually. Do you have the arrow pointing upwards?
Yeah, but it's shaded in. It's not letting me.
Okay, give me one. Manage.
Oh, there it is. Okay, I'm sharing it now.
Beautiful.
Right, can you see it?
Oh, I love this. Yes.
Okay. So we started filling this out, and our first major initiative was to create and develop a plan for the space and to work with the community in developing a healthy gathering place.
Beautiful. Vince, what are your thoughts on that?
That sounds just like a major initiative, broad in scope, broad in scope.
Beautiful.
So then we went to part 2.
Oh, you're jumping ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. We didn't
That's
need,
okay.
did I hide it?
Okay.
It's all good. It's all good. Go ahead and announce it.
Yeah,
All right, so our SMART goals, I already said what our major initiative was. So our SMART
Right.
goal was 1, by April 2022, initiate 3 committees to activate the initiative. The outcome would be weekly meetings, 9 of them in total. And forgot the result. Just disregard that. We didn't get to that part yet.
Okay.
Okay. Well, we can circle back to that. So we'll go ahead and give you guys a few more minutes to, get into that section. I think we are going to finish today early, but this is great. Vince, thoughts?
Well, I see you have a second and a third goal there, which is wonderful. Hold on, I got something blocking my view. Get rid of
Oh,
it.
let me, there. Can you see it now?
Oh, yeah, it's not you. It's someone requesting to come into the room, and when they do that, it blocks the whole screen.
Okay.
So let me try to. I can't move it either. Sorry. So, okay, yeah, okay. I see. Goal number 2 there, by April 2022, recruit 3 partnership programs that involve at least 100 users. Oh, spot on. Okay, very specific. You got a time frame. You've got numbers. The actual where it says involve at least 100 users, that can come over to the outcome. That's what you're shooting for. That's your outcome, actually, where you have a specific number. Actually, you could kind of rephrase that. Your SMART goal would be by April 2022, recruit partnership programs. Simple as that. Then over in your outcomes, you would list the 3. You have 2 numbers there that you could post. Your outcomes were very specific. 3 partnerships, and I think you had 100 users. So you have 2 outcomes.
Okay.
Then your result would probably be 100% participate. If you do that, that's 100% participation because you're meeting your outcome.
Perfect. And then do you say our third one?
Yeah, I do. By July 2022, the design team will present a holistic design to the community. Okay. We'll establish community building design. Now you got to translate that into some kind of numerical representation. By July, the design team will present a holistic design to the community. Not sure how to measure that.
Maybe you can do it based off an average of the community. So say we have a very small community, say about like 500 residents. We would say with the majority population of 400 or 350 to 400 residents or something like that.
Out of 500, yeah.
Yeah.
Out of 500. So your percentage would be what, 75% or something like that?
Yeah. So you would be trying to reach the majority, if not all, but.
Yeah.
But you would numerize that by establishing how many you have within your community.
The 75% that you have in that column moves over to the other column.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, 75%. And in that column that you just came out of, you'd say connect or reach 300 out of 500 community members. There you go.
Okay.
Beautiful.
And then get rid of design the building at the bottom there. But yes, then 75% of community members
Attended?
attended.
Okay.
Yeah, see, there, that's it.
Oh, that's so
Up at the
cool.
top, up at the top, you'd also have 100% participation. If you're able to pull off all 9 of those meetings, weekly meetings, 9, wait a second. Okay, you got 3, initiate 3 committees. Weekly oh, I see. Committees you'd have 9 committee meetings, right?
Yep.
Yep, okay. Initiate, 9 community meetings, and if all 9 are complete, then you'd have 100% completion or participation. You're good.
All right.
9, 100%. Yeah,
Oh,
there you go.
awesome.
Good job, Carol.
Thanks, Annie.
Yeah,
Annie
yeah.
and Elena were the ones who came up with all of this. I was just the typer.
That's beautiful.
But
Beautiful.
yeah, but is this helpful, because, we're trying to show you how this would apply in certain situations.
It's very helpful.
It is very helpful. One thing I noticed in this is that we had several people within our group who didn't communicate. And if everybody communicated, it probably would have made this a lot easier. Lots that's kind of going with the theme of lots of to make for light work.
Yeah.
Right.
So, but that just, yeah, but it's team effort and.
That's
I know,
great.
I know some people have difficulty with their audio. If you have low bandwidth, it's really hard to get connected.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I totally understand that. Yeah. No, I have the same issue, hence my camera is off. So definitely. All right. Well, thank you, group 1. All right.
You're
So let's go ahead and move on to group 2. And I can tell you who was in group 2. I've got Cheryl, Donald, Corrine, Celeste, Mary. So whoever ended up having the longest hair, go ahead and present. And you don't have to share your screen, but that was really cool that Carol did that. It allowed us to get a visual.
Carol, you could turn off your video as well because that uses up your bandwidth.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right, so room 2. Euler.
It's all right.
Room 2. Guys, we awake here. Celeste, I'm seeing something in the chat. So Celeste says, I was in room 2, but I will be stepping out soon. We were headed towards the same idea with the initiative to determine the programs in need / want for the community center.
Good.
Awesome.
All right.
Okay. Donald, Corrine, did anyone else have anything else they wanted to add? Oh, you're good, Carol. I have it. You stop sharing. You're set.
Yeah, just to add to what Celeste had said too for group 2 is that we looked at or we mentioned community needs assessment to find out what was actually needed in the community, thereby soliciting the community's input, maybe via survey.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
I think that's a great idea. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Good place to start. Good goal to solicit input from the community for details. And kind of follow Carol's example there, where she had, instead of committees, it's community involvement, maybe a series of community involvement sessions to solicit information. Maybe you're going to host 3 or 4 within a certain period of time, like a 12-month period. So that would be a good goal. That would be a good outcome for that goal of soliciting information from the community. And the result of that would be, participation from half of the community members or something like that. You see what I mean? I'm trying to use that solicitation of community members for information as your goal, is one of your goals.
Definitely.
Result would
And
be
so-
hold a series of sessions, or the outcome would be hold a series of community sessions. And then the result would be, some kind of percentage of participation,
Definitely.
or maybe two things, goal, outcome would be hold 6 meetings. Result would be what percentage of those 6 meetings were you able to complete? Did you get all 6 of them in? That'd be 100% of the meetings being facilitated. And then the second result, kind of a 2-part result, would be how many community members participated in the 50%, 75%, 10%. You know what I mean? So you've got a couple scenarios there just from the goal of reaching out to the community.
Definitely. All
Good stuff.
right.
That was good.
Yeah, no, good. Okay, all right. So then we're going to move on to group 3, which has Erica, Leslie, Alexandra, Carl. So any of those individuals, go ahead. I believe there's also a Donald. Go ahead and either unmute yourselves or throw your major initiative into the chat so we can get chatting about this.
Jamie was our person with the longest hair, so I'm hoping she'll put the document here shortly.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
I didn't hear my name, sorry. I thought maybe it was a different group I was in.
No, you're good. You're good.
All right, I will share my screen.
Oh, great.
Beautiful.
Oh, look at that.
So yeah, we filled in all of it too. We chose the major initiative to increase cultural knowledge.
Okay.
And SMART goal was to implement cultural activities.
Okay.
And the outcome was how many we'd like to do, at least 3 per month. And we assumed that there was some kind of survey that was done, and that's why the multi-purpose community building was built, and why we implemented the cultural knowledge activities. And you can't see it very well here, but it says 20% increase in community cultural knowledge.
Oh, okay, cool.
Thoughts, Vince?
Oh, it's great. You got it. I mean, you've done it. Well done. You laid it all out there, the initiative, the goal, and you converted numbers, and you've got your results. I like that. Well done. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you. Oh, I love this. I hope y'all are enjoying this. I really do.
These are all good.
Okay.
There's no wrong answer. These are all good scenarios.
Right. Yeah, no, definitely. And Teresa, you're good. Thank you so much for joining us. Please look out for a survey. All right. So what room did we just finish? High five.
High five.
Beautiful. 3. All right, I'm gonna jump to group 4, I believe. So we've got a Mila, Howard. There are 3 others. I can't see everyone who's in the room, so those are the 2 names that are popping up most. I wish I could see. Does anyone remember group 4? Okay, let me see if I can look back at breakroom. Second. Loading, it's loading, it's loading. Oh, beautiful. Okay, there was Mila, Michelle, Miguel, and Howard. Going once. Going twice. All right, moving on. That is A-okay. All right, and then group 6. Because I skipped group 5. There was nobody in that room. We've got Paul, Rosemary, Sharon, Tina, Renita, and Teresa. Individual with the longest hair, you can go ahead and either put your info in the chat box or unmute yourself and have the discussion with us. Don't be shy, folks.
There's much going on in this group. However, you know, that was brought up, we'd have to figure out a location, funding.
Okay. Yeah, so I'm looking at your guys' chat and I'm seeing major initiatives, get the funding, secure building plans, and set an open date. So Vince, do you maybe want to work off of some of those?
Yeah, we assume that the funding is going to be a given. We're all looking for the funding, so I'm going to take that out of the equation because that's something that really can't be done until we narrow down. That's kind of the whole purpose of, or one of the main purposes of using the logic model to help us clarify things and put, our success and our projections in there so that we can pursue funding. So what we're looking for here is more of the tangible things like the plan. And we heard that back in a couple sessions ago, either session 1 or session 2. The plan was one of the initial first goals was have a series of planning sessions. And then that was the goal, have a series of planning sessions. Or maybe it's even more specific, have 6 planning sessions. And then the result was, that was actually the result, have 6, or the outcome, 6 planning sessions. And then the result of the 6 planning sessions that they all fell in place was 100% participation. So you could break the planning is a good goal for that major initiative of a facility. Planning would be one, and as I showed in my demonstration, that might be a good goal to pursue. The next one would be the pre-construction or construction phase. So that would be, because that's going to take some doing. So there might be that's a good goal in itself. So yeah, what you have there is pretty good. I think we take the seeking funding out of the equation because that's really done kind of after we put all these other things into play. It's hard to pursue a grant if you don't have all the pieces put together and you know what you're doing. So the grant actually, seeking funding actually gets put at the back end of that. Not that it's less important, but it's just done after we put all the pieces of the project into place up front. Hope that makes sense.
Can I add something?
Absolutely.
Yeah, go for it.
Oh, I'm not sure who that was talking, but it was pretty quiet in our group. Just there's two of us in here, and so just one thing we kind of jotted down was overall build a multi-purpose community center to serve youth in the community. But it is very broad. So
Yeah,
the SMART goal we just kind of jotted was by May 2020, host 3 community informational sessions. I guess to determine what the purpose is going to be, serving who, serving what specifically, how many youth do we have, what is the population, to look at how big is the building we're going to need, which then goes towards how much funding are we going to need. And then for the hold on. For the outcome, we have looking at if there's a population of, say, maybe 500 youth, we want to at least capture maybe 200 youth or more to get input to see what their needs are. And then percentage, the next one is just maybe getting 50% of those youth to in the development.
Okay. Okay. So you thought it all the way through. That's great. Those are good examples.
Great. Yay. Oh, you have no idea how happy this makes me. I'm geeking out on strategic planning. Look at that, Vince. 5
Yeah.
years and this is what you do to me.
Telling you.
Alrighty. Okay, so I think for the most part, that's it seems most of you have gotten the assignment. You even went a little bit further and jumped into my activity 2, which is totally okay because we're actually ahead of schedule, and I think this might be good. We might finish today early, like I mentioned a little earlier, which again is totally fine. But with that, we're going to just go ahead and jump into activity 3 because it seems that most of you have already determined your outcomes and all that wonderful jazz, if you will. So activity 3, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Just give me 1 second. And all of you are going to be in the same group. So do we see this?
You mean a general session?
No, so they're I'm actually gonna have them separated into their groups again. Ugh,
Okay.
what's this doing?
Okay.
Yeah.
But this should be actually the easier part because you've already, for most of it, from what I can tell, already went through the process of not only fine tuning the major initiative, but also developing SMART goals and outcomes, at least for the short term.
Beautiful.
So
Yes.
you should be able, as you see on the screen here, you should be able to take your projections that you just vocalized and also showed on the screen. You should be able to project those out into subsequent years, 23, 24, and 25. If you can't, it's probably because you haven't been able to fine tune your current projections as you see on the screen here. See that column in red? Everything's clearly defined, so it's easy to project out. If you can't project out, it's probably because maybe your SMART goals or your outcomes or your results are not clearly defined enough. So you might have to go back and kind of fine tune your initial first year. Let's go 22. And then once you've got those, if you could go back to the prior slide just for a second. Once you get those cleaned up, then you can project out to subsequent years.
It has a mind of its own.
Yeah, see that. Out of control.
Come on. There we go.
Back one more. Right
there we go.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Yeah, if you're unable to project 23, 24, and 25 in this scenario, it's simply because your numbers in fiscal year 22, whatever you have proposed, are not clearly defined. So that's what you got to make sure of. And as you can see in this example, it's easy to project out into subsequent years because each one of those major areas of the logic model, major initiative, SMART goal, outcome, result, are all clearly defined. So that makes it real easy for me, all things being equal, to push it out to 23, 24, and 25 using the economies of scale, getting better at what we do. Hopefully, you're able to do the same thing with your scenarios that you presented. If not, you need to go back to the drawing board and just kind of recalculate. So, you can either do that in the group session, Crystal, they can do that, or just, you want to spend a little bit of time doing that. I'm not saying that we got to spend the next 30 minutes doing that, but I think you understand where I'm coming from. It's easy it should be relatively easy to push your projections out if your numbers are there for you. Hope that makes sense.
Yeah. So, okay, let's go ahead. I'm going to change the time on the exercise then. I have it set for 17 minutes.
You can make it a little shorter.
Okay, I'll do like 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
Can you put the task in the chat too once we start?
Sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
All right, folks, does that make sense? You know, to be able to project out in your strategic plan years 2, 3, and 4, and so forth, you need to have not only the major initiative with, I mean, there's no numbers tied to the major initiative. It's just a major initiative. It's when you get into the goals and the outcomes and the results of your goals that need to be statistically there. Then you're able to push things out and use those economics factors, those multiplication factors to or not, but you can, the economies of scale, et cetera, to push your projections out. If you can't do it, it's simply because you don't have the math set up. You don't have the figures, the numbers that you need. So it's either there or it's not.
Not sure what just got put into the chat. Hold on one second.
So you may want to go back to that screen, share that screen again that you had up with the that we were talking about a moment ago.
Yeah, they wanted it in the chat though.
Oh, I got you. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Understood.
I will go ahead and throw that into each of your rooms. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and open them. 10 minutes. And the goal, so listen close. The goal of this exercise is using the initiative, SMART goals, outcomes, and results developed. Use the logic model system to demonstrate a 3-year strategic plan. Okay? And ready, set, go.
All right. Based on your projection that you shared.
Yes.
For at least the immediate future. Again, if it's difficult to project outcomes and results, which are numerically based, numerically focused, it's because your initial development doesn't have those figures built into it. You've got to have those numerical figures built in to be able to project out. Otherwise, they're just statements. Hope that makes sense.
If y'all can see that.
Just need to go dark for 1 minute. I'll be right back.
Okay. Okay. Well then. I hope you found that to be helpful. Gotta run. No worries. Thank you for attending, and please look out for our survey. All right, so let's go ahead and go with group 1. Hopefully y'all remember who was in your group. Go ahead and unmute yourselves.
Yeah, and the question is, were you able to project out? Were you able
Yes.
to follow using the logic model processes, components? Were you able to be successful in projecting your 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever? Were you able to pull that off? Or do you need to go back and do some more work, more number crunching?
So I had, and I know that quite a few people have kind of dropped off, but I had Calvin, Annie, Bradley, Elena, Carol, and Anne. Going once. Going twice. Okay, moving on. Group 2, Cheryl, Cynthia, Celeste, Donald, and Corrine.
So we didn't have much discussion in our group, but looking back at the major initiative, I was thinking about our community needs assessment and the SMART goals that we were going to apply would be, specific. What do we want to do with, as a SMART goal being specific? And I think when you're looking at community centers, maybe you could focus on youth and elder services as a, kind of an outcome.
Yeah.
And the result for that fiscal year one would be, that's our determination. We would like to provide youth and elder services. Fiscal year two would be, I guess, program planning. And that's as far as I could go out, I guess, or that's as far as I got.
Okay.
No, and that's good. And that's good. And if you can assign some kind of numerical target for them, then you're falling within the parameters of the logic model process. Those are all good targets that you're talking about, but when we start assigning numbers to them with specifics, then we start being using the logic model successfully. But it sounds like you're moving in the right direction.
Beautiful.
Love it.
All right. So,
I just want to say one thing too.
Oh, go ahead.
A lot of people, especially tribes, we always want, these programs, we want to snap our fingers and have these things in place. And a lot of times successful programs usually take at least a year of planning, maybe two to actually get to that point where you can start, providing services.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a long-term projection for sure.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay. Yes, thank you. All right. Group 3, Erica just left, but Carl, Alexandra, Donald, Jamie, and Lakeisha.
All right. So we had the major initiative to increase cultural knowledge, and we developed the cultural activities in the first year, and we developed 3 activities for each month. We had to change these a little bit to support what we needed down here. And the result was that we had 100% increase in community cultural activities available because there were none before. So in the second year, fiscal year 23, we implemented 1 cultural activity per quarter that was developed in 22. And we expected at least 20 attendees per class per quarter. And that was 100% increase in cultural knowledge. 24 implemented 2 per quarter with 40 attendees per quarter, which was a 50% increase. And then year 3, we implemented 3 cultural activities per quarter for 60 attendees per class per quarter. And I guessed a 25% increase in cultural knowledge.
Sure, because by the time after 3 years, you've almost reached out to everybody at that point. So I can see how your increments, your result are your decreasing percentages because more and more people are becoming, aware. And so your percentages are, this is a perfect example. Well done. This is A+.
Thank you.
You've used the logic model process, you've calculated it. That's a textbook example.
Yeah, and something that I was confused about that I think Alex pointed out is that major initiative stays the same every year. I thought you had to change it a little bit each year, but
not necessarily. If that's a major initiative, that's your major initiative until it's done. Right? Okay, and that's
never
what's
done in that case.
Yeah, there's always improvements, right? So you might have a dozen major initiatives. That one's going to stay in effect, maybe in perpetuity. You always want it there, but your goals are going to change over time. And so forth. So well done.
Thank you.
You're good. Anyone else? Okay.
Oh, Crystal just posted that she's freezing.
Turn up the heat. I'm freezing up. Okay. Anyone else have any other comments they want to share? Any of the other groups? I'm not going to call you out by group number, but if anyone wants to share, I'm all ears at this point. Give me one. She's trying to get back in. Teams reboot. And so is Jackbot. Yeah.
That's cute. How do you do that?
A section
Oh.
that says GIF at the bottom. You just
Oh,
click on
let's
that,
see.
and I use Teams a lot, obviously, if you can't tell.
I don't have an option for gifts. That's weird.
Yeah, I have mine down at the bottom of the screen. Very bottom right. There's a little icon down there, GIF.
As long as you're in the chat box, yeah. As long as you have the chat box open, it's at the bottom.
Nope, there's nothing. I have an edit. Anyway.
That kind of advice is beyond my skill set. I had to refer to Crystal for that, for advice on making that work. Anyone else? Please, if there's any other comments or any other input you have, we've seen some great examples of using the process to create not only current goal projections, SMART goals, but also projecting outcomes and results, not only in the short term, but as you saw with kind of the strategic planning exercise, that if it's done correctly and if you have the logic model process in place with the numbers, you should be able to project out, and it's not as overwhelmingly difficult as hopefully, some people think it is. It's really not. If you spend the time working on current goals and the process currently, you should be able to project out. But we always need to build in the possibility of growth and the possibility at the same time of stagnation, that things are going to slow us down. Or reverse concepts like was just shown with Jamie, where her percentages decreased instead of increasing. There she is, she's back. So all of those are part of the process. There's no rule that says that your percentages have to increase over time. They can decrease, as Jamie showed in her example, because more and more people were becoming exposed based on her scenario there. So the percentage of increase decreased over time. The numbers increased, but the percentage of overall population decreased. It's just simple math there. So that's the nice thing about this logic model process. Jamie showed a perfect textbook example of how it should work. The major initiative stayed the same, and I think her point was, in this particular case, it might stay the same for a long time, but the goals will change as the years progress, and obviously the outcomes will change, and so will the results. That's what it's for. That's what it's designed for. And we need to be able to change those scenarios as time goes on. Crystal, anything to add? I'm not sure we have anything more to beat around.
Yeah, no, can you hear me?
You're low.
Hello?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, good. Okay, yeah, no, I think we can close out if everyone's good with that. Kind of release all you little birdies early. Can you give me a thumbs up in the chat? Because I can at least see the chat box on my screen here, or like a yes, if we're good, if we got the concept, if we're happy. Awesome.
Happy and you know it. Clap your hands.
Yeah. Yes, thank you. Very helpful. Awesome. That's what I want to hear. Thank you guys so much. Now I'm on my phone talking to all of you. The beauty of technology. All right. So with that, I'm just going to go ahead and close out. I can't share the slides. I don't know, Vince, if you want to. You don't really have to. They're just the survey. Yeah, it's all good. So you'll just see me here. But with that, again, thank you all so much. I went ahead and plugged the survey into the chat. I would really, really appreciate it if all of you can just take a second to go ahead and do that for me. It lets us know how we can improve, what else we can do. Any suggestions that you might have are always helpful for us. I mean, my job is to develop training programs, so the more feedback I get, the better. With that, what else do we have here? And then join us for our next training as well on May 13th. Build your own small business plan workshop. It's going to be instructed by Vince as well, and that'll be 1 p.m. Eastern, 12 p.m. Central, 11 a.m. Mountain, and 10 a.m. Pacific. As always, registration's free. The Eventbrite link for that should already be up. I will be sure to include that in the follow-up email that I'm going to be sending out. So thank you, thank you. And then just a reminder, this was recorded, so you can access this on our YouTube channel. Just go onto YouTube, find Native Learning Center. You should see our famous logo, the black, red, yellow logo that we have, and yeah, and then just it'll be posted with the exact title that you joined in today's session. So definitely, and then don't forget to access our recorded webinars as well. You can find those on www.nativelearningcenter.com. Ooh, I'm getting feedback. But we keep them
Past
up for about
lunchtime.
we keep them up for about 18 months, so feel free to view them and share them with your friends and colleagues. Don't forget our podcast, the Hobo Thing, a podcast, which you can find on Apple, Spotify, and Google, as well as Simplecast. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I hope you guys really did enjoy the session today. Like I said, we try to make it as helpful and informative as possible. If there's anything else we can do for y'all, just let us know. Reach out, and I'm going to go ahead and plug in my email address, especially if you're looking for technical assistance. We are here to see what we can do for you. All right. Well, that's it. All right, everyone, have a great rest of your day, and hope to see y'all in the next session.
Crystal Cardino.